The circular textiles industry is not just about the products that we make, but the way in which those products flow through the system. Last year, together with the WCTD signatories, we established a vision for products and services in 2050. It will be a time when products and services are designed for multiple use and material value retention and with maximum positive impact in mind. A time when reuse and access models are dominant, and when all new products in the market are multifunctional, seasonless, and timeless, and built with the second, third, and fourth life already in mind. It will also be a time when we, the consumer, are consuming from a place of need rather than want. We heard earlier from Kate about how material and product design is increasingly embracing circular principles. And we know that designers recognize that they need to marry the garbage man, that they need to think beyond the point of sale and consider the end of use and the eventual end of life of their products and design accordingly. But we also know that the reality is that we have circular design intent in a linear world. And by that I mean that despite the fact that we may be designing for recyclability, we have no assurance that those products will actually be recycled in practice. And despite the fact that we may be designing for repairability, we do not know if those items will indeed be brought back in a system where they are repaired. So how are our business models, our systems, and our services evolving? We looked at over 90 case studies in the Knowledge Hub, and we spoke to our signatories in order to understand what have the developments been in the past year in this space. The first thing that we found is perhaps not a surprise, because we're seeing it all around us. The brand uptake of circular business models across all market segments is accelerating. We know that the resale market is growing faster than traditional retail at 15% annually. And some estimations are saying that within 10 years, it will outpace and be bigger than fast fashion. Now, while on a smaller scale, rental is also seeing a boom and also growing faster than traditional retail with 11% annual growth rate. While brands are increasingly understanding why these circular business models are needed and the multitude of benefits that they can bring them, they still struggle with the how. How do I develop a business model? How do I implement this? Last April 2021, Circular Economy launched the Circular Toolbox, which is a step-by-step guide that supports brands to design and launch pilots in the space of rental and resale.
Most new products will fail in the market, period.
Are you in or are you out? Because with this project, we're going to go on a arduous, difficult, uphill journey, like climbing the Himalayas.
Our very mission is to slow down consumption. We want more people to buy fewer items and have them last longer.
We also saw that this makes business sense, and we see an opportunity here.
Altruism is the most powerful of all of those motivating factors if you can get it right.
Any final thoughts before we kind of enter into the concepting phase?
What's important to us is that we do this, we do it quick, we can go big, we can lean on other people's expertise.
Somebody's at the door, there's an emergency, a young kid jumps on your back or a cat sits on your shoulder. We understand. High five, high five, high five to the webcam. There you go.
Off the back of that, Lindex launching a pilot and Asket launching a pilot last year. But we also saw a whole raft of other brands stepping into the arena, from Timberland to Urban Outfitters to Asda to Harvey Nichols, Browns, H&M. Now, behind a lot of these brand-led initiatives are innovators and solution providers who are actually responsible for the handling of the products, the cleaning, the logistics, the sortation, the renewal. And last year, we saw a huge amount of investments being made to improve and to scale the operations of these solution providers and innovators, from vintage to the renewal workshop to Trove. We're also seeing more garment technologies being activated to enable greater efficiency in these evolving systems, and some interesting partnerships coming to light to really test these technologies in action. So for instance, between Circular.Fashion and Fairwertung and 5 German brands putting the circularity ID to the test. And also partnerships between, for instance, Houdini and Eon, who are trying to enable greater connectivity between Houdini garments and the cloud. Another interesting development is early stage signs of greater integration and connection between rental, resale, and recycling loops. Whether that is cross-innovator partnerships, for instance, the fact that Hur launched an initiative during the year where its retired items from their rental system were being sold secondhand on the Depop platform, or sometimes a diversification of offerings with existing innovators. So for instance, Rent the Runway, obviously primarily a rental service, stepping into the resale space and starting to actually sell secondhand pre-rented items on their store. And finally, we are seeing increased recognition on the need to build these circular systems so that they have a positive social impact. And that conversation is gaining traction, with some interesting research also coming to light in that space. For instance, a piece of research from our teams internally at Circular Economy during the year called Putting Circular Textiles to Work, which is looking at how you can achieve 100% circularity within the Netherlands by going into different circular strategies. So one scenario where you prioritize a change in consumer behavior and reduction in overall consumption, another scenario where you're prioritizing repair and reuse, and a third scenario where you're prioritizing recycling and fiber processing, and really analyzing what are the environmental but also the social impacts of these different routes, of these different flavors, and how do we keep materials and people functioning at their highest potential in how we design these new circular supply chains. And interestingly, in this instance for the Netherlands, it showed that a system built to prioritize repair and reuse would have the greatest employment effects, with a 25% increase compared to the current state. So lots of developments, lots of movement, and in all the right direction. But I think we still have some challenges to iron out in this space. I think next year we're going to see more connection between resale, rental, and recycling models, and an integration of these systems and a cascading of material flows. I think we also need to develop as an industry metrics to quantify and track the true environmental impact of these emerging models, and to prove that they are indeed doing what they say on the tin, that they are increasing utilization, that they are displacing the need for new production and consumption. I think we need to find a way to share the lessons learned between brands as they move from pilot to scale. And finally, I think that there's a lot of work that needs doing to address the local and the global social impacts and ramifications of these models as they emerge, and get ahead of any risks or blind spots on that front. Finally, I will leave us with the words of one of our signatories, TextAid, who are a leader in the European field around collection, sortation, and recycling, and hear from them a little bit about what they do, but more importantly, what have their developments and their challenges been in the past year.
Hello, my name is Martin Boschen and I'm the CEO of TextAid. I'm also the president of the textile division at Bureau of International Recycling and vice president Europe Textiles. My company TextAid is the leading collector, sorter and recycler of used post-consumer garments in Europe. We are very happy to be here at World Circular Textile Day today. At TextAid, we prolong the life of around 1 million textiles every day by bringing them to reuse or to recycling. Through our activities, we prevent about 1.4 billion kilos of CO2 emissions and save about 2.2 billion liters of water every year. This is a good thing, but it's not enough. As many as you are aware, most textile recycling is currently linear, meaning we make a wiper out of this shirt or some filling material out of this pullover, hopefully only when they cannot be reused anymore at the end of their technical lifespan. Over the past years, we've been working together with our partners from the recycling industry on more circular recycling processes, with the objective to produce new fibers out of defective garments. At TextAid, we don't run these recycling processes ourselves yet, but we provide the feedstock to a variety of partners. In the past year, we could see an uptake in demand, even if this is still at a low level, and we could run multiple tests on feedstock specifications, making the material coming into the process is better. However, we have still a lot of challenges ahead to go to 100% circularity in textiles. One of the main issues is the variety of materials and garments, which make recycling really difficult. Another one is the business model. Compared to virgin material, recycling fibers are still way too expensive. So we need to work on the costs. And as well maybe on the regulation, introducing measures like mandatory recycled content in new products in order to increase demand for recycled fibers. In the end, we just, and I know that's easy to say, but hard to achieve, a high level of cooperation and commitment along the value chain to reach circularity. This needs to go from the producers, over the brands, the collectors, sorters and recyclers, back to the producers. So I'm very happy to see all these stakeholders committed to the World Circular Textiles Day, and I'm looking forward to many interesting conversations and successful projects in the future.
Okay, welcome back. Thank you for that brilliant film, Gwen. Super sorry you can't be with us, but we are really happy to be able to do a hybrid sort of event with you involved, and you haven't had to emit the carbon to get here all the way from Dublin. So what struck me about the film that you sent in is that we're in this sort of phase now where we're really beginning to understand the breadth of what circularity and circular textiles is about. It's always about materials and the technology for recycling the materials. But as we know now, it's about so many other aspects and all the aspects and how they work together. So the people who are passionate and involved in circular textiles and circular fashion are the same people quite often who are absolutely really committed to zero carbon targets, sustainability, ethics in labour. We want to see a better industry. So I think what we're discovering is, what we have discovered is that for us, the idea of circularity gives us a bit of a route map, really, a bit of a sort of structure and framework to work within towards achieving a better industry. But it's not everything. And some things are more easy to understand than others. Some things are much more developed than others. So we need to reduce the amount of waste in the system. We need to reduce overproduction and overconsumption. There needs to be just less of everything in the system. We need those things to be recycled. We need those things to be less toxic. We need those things to be made better by people who've been paid fairer wages. We need lots of things to change. So they wrap into these circular questions, but they're not always driving it. Because circularity will always be about reprocessing and the regeneration of our materials. But these other questions are really important. So beginning to see with products and services is just how important it is to grow that kind of culture and community around the sharing economy. But as well as all these other bolt-on services, not even bolt-on, they're core services that are needed to help products move, right?
When we first even were trying to, discuss the pillars, the services part could have almost gone with any other of the pillars. It's so important. And
every aspect of circularity needs a service or a technology.
Yeah, we couldn't separate them at all. And I think, so many of these products have material, collection services attached to them, need consumer behaviours to change. No product's just a product.
Well, and I think that as equally the word circularity that comes to mind is connectivity. We need connectivity between people and, a couple of examples, product and material ID, connecting products and people and brands and data and information is going to be key in the future. We need connectivity between, the supply chain. A good example, Bank and Vogue with their relationship with RenewCell, changing the way they're sorting textiles to be able to supply for this future world of regenerative recycling and an increase in mechanical recycling. All those flows of materials are going to change dramatically as soon as we start seeing regenerative recycling plants proliferate around the world, and those flows of end-of-use textiles are going to look radically different than they do today.
Tracking the flows is one thing we find over and over again is, the data doesn't exist in totality the way it is at the moment today. So, all these kind of product traceability technologies that are coming online where we actually, get to see where materials end up will be so key, as well as kind of technology by people like Reverse Resources, uncovering parts of our waste stream that we didn't even know existed.
Yeah, it's been like working blind with a whole load of mess, but a hell of a lot of emotion and commitment, which actually doesn't get very far if you want to convince governments to change. So, that's just a small example, but we need lots and lots of data. We need the information. We need to sort of really grasp the whole system, the knowledge around the whole system to make the changes and to build these new flows. Mm-hmm. One of the questions that came in on the chat, which I thought was great, because we, at Centre for Circular Design, we do focus on design, and we've been introducing products and services for many years now, going right back to when we had our 10 strategies for sustainable design. So what can designers do to contribute towards the sort of growth of products and services in circular textiles? What are we looking at their challenge being?
I suppose, on the first rung, it's about them getting informed and understanding the impact further down the chain. It's always this idea of circularity, trying to look around the corner and understand the impacts that you're creating. But I think it's been quite difficult to be, confident about that sort of until recently.
Well, you can't work on your own anymore, can you? Because you've got to make the product, but you've got to make the product differently because it's going to be used differently, maybe used a lot more if it goes into service. So
some great companies, I'm just thinking of people that we've been working with, like Circular Fashion or a new exciting company called Made From, this idea that you can bring that data or that sort of understanding of circularity into the design process, which, it's early days, but
if you know where it's heading and how it's going to be used, if you start with that as your design brief, things actually really do change at the outset. But also to sort of think about, for me, I always think about services if people love a textile and want a textile in their life, how can we give them that sort of pleasure and emotional engagement in another way that isn't through material? Maybe how can we, if they're fashion, we know it's about identity and community and belonging and sort of fun, really, isn't it? Dressing up. So, of course, that's where rental and loan comes in for different groups amongst us, because actually what you want is change in your wardrobe.
So after years of people saying, oh, it'll never work for fashion, right now there are so many new startups in this area doing incredibly well, and just look at H&M and Selfie's kind of cooperation. it was unthinkable a few years ago.
It is interesting because in Gwen's film, she talks about the growth of these markets and actually sort of, them outpacing the growth of fast fashion. And of course, that set alarm bells off, though, hasn't it? Because people are now really worried about the footprint. I think there was a report this year. I think it's made it on the Knowledge Hub, actually. And, but it did say, I think it was an article that said that it was better to throw your clothes away.
Oh, that's right.
Right? Than, than reuse them or resell them. How do you want to unpick that a bit? We know it's to do with LCA, right?
Yeah, it's all about boundaries. The data on its own, doesn't give you the whole picture. So I think, again, it's like all of the different people that need to work together. We've just got to keep unpicking that kind of data. Just because, there's a headline, it doesn't mean there's not more behind.
When you looked at that actually in depth, what it was talking about was transportation.
Yeah.
So the calculations, LCA, life cycle assessment, takes a series of calculations, and actually it's about this transporting. And as soon as you're sort of driving a car to pick up the rental dress that you wear only once, then you take it back and then it gets cleaned. They're adding all of those up. So there's a sort of use pattern that becomes the sort of standard. So of course it does look like on paper sometimes that it's worse to sort of take a garment through that. But it doesn't really allow for the fact that you can be going there on foot, or as you're passing on the way to school, or, it's delivered, or, there are different ways, I think, that we can sort of explore in the right ways these sharing economy models as we move forward.
And there's a lot more to do around measurement, so we can compare what's better, what's worse, what's the preferable model. I know there was a question about, when going back to raw materials, about whether what's better, mechanical or chemical recycling. And I think, what we're finding now is it's, in the whole recycling hierarchy, having both, they're actually complementary. And there's an article recently by Helene Smits, who is at RecoverTex, in Sourcing Journal. And she talked a lot about the complementary nature of mechanical and chemical recycling, because if you can keep something in circulation or use it in a different way before you get to chemical recycling, all the better. It's less environmental impact. And that's the thing, I think we're still in the early days of the measurements being done, but that kind of parallels what's happening with data. We can start implementing that, getting that more involved in products, in systems, then it becomes clearer what the right route is, or what the better route is. Maybe not right or wrong, but a better route.
Well, it is, because I think, we have to get beyond, in lots of conversations, it is binary, right or wrong. We're really understanding the nuances now. And that is accelerating, actually. I'm glad to say that those conversations where people go, they ask the question, is it yes or no? And you say, you can't answer it with yes or no. First of all, we've actually got to these questions to even get to this point. But this is what I find frustrating with journalism sometimes, because they need the headline and then they paint this most simplistic story of something that's really, okay, we know it's complicated, but it could be explained a lot better than the article often ends up doing.
Yeah, and it's the same with materials. Is one material better than the other? Well, it's not just about the material. It's about how it's made in production. It's about what happens end of life. There's so many complex issues. So I think we're going to come later talking about going forward and what's needed. But I think this is one of the areas where we can do with a lot more understanding and actual data.
Good, great. And for that, we need products and services. Yes. We need data services. Okay, great. The last section then is people and society, and we have the final film of today's event.